everybody. It is Teri Lucas of Terificreations, author of Color. I don't even know what my book title is. Color, Thread, and Free Motion Quilting, Learn to Stitch with Reckless Abandon. I am here today with Brint Fanizza of Famore Cutlery, and I have to tell you, I've known him a really long time. He probably gives almost the best hugs in the industry, because I actually give the better hugs in the industry. But Brint, like, you need to get a Brint hug. And next time you are at a show, make sure you find his booth, because if you need scissors, this is the place to go. Welcome, Brint.
Thanks, Teri. And this is really a weird thing, because every time I see you, I get to hug you, and I don't get to hug you right now, and I just want to hug you. And folks, you know, we probably should have a hugging, booth at the show to see who does give the best hugs. But I will tell you, Teri, you do give a pretty darn good hug. I hate those, where they pat you, and the one thing I will never forget, the very first time I met you and the very first time we hugged, and it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome.
All right, so tell me a little bit about you, a little bit about Famore. Like, how were you founded? Because like scissors is a pretty fascinating field to go into.
Oh, I didn't realize how fascinating it was when I started this, but careful what you ask for, may come true.
Oh yeah, of course.
So it was about 25 years ago. It was
only 25?
What do you mean only?
Like, I thought you've been around for like 50. Like,
do I look that old?
No, not you. The company.
No. Yeah, I used to be a pitchman. Billy Mays, we worked for the same company, and it was our job to develop scripts for people that were developing products that were wanting to take them to the mass market, but didn't have a story for the product. So we would create those stories, present them to QVC, Home Shopping Network, things like that. We would take them to different shows, trade shows, state fairs, bridal shows, things like that. And we would demonstrate the products to see the consumer's reaction, right, and get traction. Okay. And there was a guy that was always at the shows. He had what they call we call the flat joint, flat booth, where it was just products on the table. People would come up, and he had everything from nail clippers, surgical items, manicure, pedicure, and he was always busy. And he came up to me one day and he said, he says, "You're incredibly good." And he said, "You'd be great at what I do." And I was looking at starting another kind of business, a side business, and it seemed interesting to me. So I bought his retail business. And shortly after that, he said he was wanting to sell his wholesale business. Said he was a factory direct guy, this, that, the other. Come to find out, he wasn't a factory direct guy. And back then I didn't really know what a good quality pair of scissors was to a bad quality pair of scissors. If it cut, right? Right. All the scissors were very, very basic. They came from China, they came from Pakistan, they came from Taiwan. Just very basic, riveted scissors, no real standards to them. But for the fairs and stuff like that, it was okay, and did okay with it. Got a call from the original Sewing and Craft Expo back then. Now today they're called the Original Sewing and Quilt Expo, and wanting to know if I would vend at their show. And I got pretty excited. I was like, "Ooh, crafting show, this could be good." And got to the show. It was literally the smallest show I'd ever been to in my life. And we got to the show and it was just like, what is this? I mean, there was like 2 aisles of vendors. It was tiny.
Wow.
Setting up the booth, and the person that was to the left of me was Clotilda. I don't know if you remember Clotilda or not. And
I remember the catalog.
I get a little emotional telling this story, so bear with me. And then to the right of me was Margaret Islander from Islander's Sewing School. And she was actually from Grants Pass, Oregon. And I saw the banner that said Grants Pass, Oregon. And I said, oh my God, I used to live in Grants Pass. I said, I was the campaign manager for the guy that became the sheriff at 16 years old. And she goes, my assistant is Karen Calvert. Well, Karen Calvert was Dan Calvert's, the undersheriff's wife. So I was just like, wait a minute. So I already had a connection with her, not knowing that the two people that were on each side of me were absolutely industry icons, industry leaders, innovators. Clotilda probably being the most infamous person in the industry at the time. And the show opened and we were busy. We were selling product, and I was watching this lady Clotilda at her booth, and she always stood up on a podium and people would come up to her. How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do this? And she had a demonstration board for everything, Terry. I mean, it was quite impressive. And she'd sit there and she'd tell people all of her trade secrets and they'd walk away. And I went up to her and I says, ma'am, I says, I don't know who you are, but I said, you've got to be the most dumbest person I've ever met. And she looked at me.
Brent!
And she said, excuse me? I said, ma'am, I said, you're giving your trade secrets. I said, to everybody that's walking up here. And I said, and they're just walking away, leaving you empty handed. Well, not knowing that she was teaching and that, that she was, anyway, she said, she gets off her booth and she said, let me tell you, she said, if you make it in this business, she says, you will learn there are no trade secrets. And she said, let me come over and see what you have. And she went from one end of my booth to the other, which wasn't that big at the time. And she said, what you have, she said, is something we need. But she said, this quality isn't going to cut it. But she said, we need somebody that's got connections that can deliver the product that is needed and wanted. And she said, if you listen to me, she says, I will teach you everything that a scissor needs to be. And Teri Lucas, God rest her soul, she did. And for those that don't know, she got Alzheimer's. And we did a big tribute for her at the original Sewing and Quilt Expo years later. And by that time, I realized that, as I was developing my business and people were buying my product to teach their students with and to supply their students with the products, that it just wasn't my reputation any longer. Now that onus was on the educator. And if my product wasn't meeting the standards of that educator, it wasn't a reflection of me because my name wasn't on the product. There was no branding, there was no nothing at that time. It was that educator. And I realized very quickly that I either needed to get incredibly serious about what I was doing or stop it completely. And I really fell in love with the sewing, quilting, and embroidery industry. I mean, having friends like yourself, I mean, what's not to love, right? And so I thought really long and hard about it, and I went on a quest to look for a factory, and I just didn't want a factory building my product. A lot of companies will have a product made for them that they have no control over, really, the quality standards or the actual manufacturing process of it. So I took some metallurgy classes, understanding the different types of metals and heat treatments and tempering and yada yada, different platings and so on and so forth. And the more I researched it, the more intrigued I became with it. So I went on a quest and I went to all the scissor manufacturers that were here in the United States at the time, which wasn't that many. But most of them were either going out of business or they were going over to China. Found out where China's scissor capital was. Went to China, entered with no meetings set up. I just wanted to go and I just started knocking on doors, factories' doors. And I was mortified. I was mortified at the amount of child labor. I was mortified at the quality standards. And I got so discouraged. And I came back and it was just like, maybe my dream is just a dream and it'll never become a reality. A friend of mine from Pakistan, became really good friends with. Somebody introduced me to him and we became really good friends. And he said, he says, my father's going to be coming to the States in a couple of weeks. He said, see if he would be interested. So his dad came and it was love at first sight. When we met, it was just an instant connection. I explained to him that what I was wanting to do, and he looked at me and he said, I would love to learn how to build quality. He said, people come to us, he said, because our labor is cheap. And I says, I'm not interested in cheap. I says, I'm interested in quality. And it was not far after 9/11. And he said, why don't you come to Pakistan? And he said, see what it's like, see if it's something you'd be interested in. I went to Pakistan for 2 weeks and fell in love with it. Fell in love with the factory, fell in love with the people. The experience that I was seeing firsthand was not at all what I was told I would see. It was not what I was seeing on my televisions here in the States. It was completely different. And I came back to the States. I spoke with my accountant and asked him if this was doable. And he said, if you think it's doable, do it. And I went back. The next trip I went back for 2 months and haven't looked back.
So is it 2 months on, 2 months off where you're going there, or are you?
It's a month to 2 months. I've spent as much as 3 months there. But now it's about a month at a time, and I go at least 3 times a year, if not 4 times a year.
Okay.
I just got back and I'm going to be heading back in about 3 weeks for another month.
You're leaving us again?
And
From that then, what was the first pair of scissors that was developed out of this big change that you made with the company and where you were sourcing things?
so really what it was the first thing I wanted to do is up the standards of the quality of the items that are needed. So there's 2 types of products. There's needed products and then there's wanted products. Those needed products are going to be here today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Your traditional 8-inch bent trimmer. I mean, this is a standard item that'll be around forever, right? The more trendier items are the more wanted items. And the first complicated task that we did was the micro tip, which was our 7-Eleven micro tip scissor, the little 4-inch scissor with the real fine taper points. When you go on a quest of taking raw steel and developing it into a precision instrument, there's a lot of steps to it. I mean, just in a basic pair of our standard finish, there's over 64 processes this scissor goes through by hand. 64 processes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, this pair of scissors goes through 4 different fire, where it gets heated up to a melting point and then cooled back down 4 different times, and the amount of hammering that it goes through, the drilling, the tapping, the setting, making sure that those blades have the right, curvatures and everything else. So, the micro tip was getting that scissor to cut right at the very, very tip, and developed it in the beginning for the hand appliquers. very frustrating, nerve-wracking. I mean, we went through hundreds upon hundreds of rejected. And I finally said, you know what, forget it. I said, let's just stop. We're wasting too much money on this. And
Okay.
I went back up to my office, and it was about 9 o'clock that evening. I heard all the labor hooping and hollering, and I went to my balcony and I looked out, and they were like, come. And I came down, and they had 12 pair that they wanted to show me. And those 12 pair, I still have the original one that they gave me, was perfect back then. And I was just like, you know, I was ready to give up, but those people up there, they weren't ready to give up, and they didn't give up.
Okay, so that is where he wanted to learn quality, and you knew what you needed, and so they were willing to go for it because they wanted to produce a good product.
So I had the ideas, I had the concepts, I had the vision, they had the factory, and they had the talent. So, you know, when you put those together, you know,
Right.
you know, it should be a recipe for success, right?
Well, okay. So one of the things that I have learned is that success is a series of failures and not giving up.
Amen, sister.
Right. You know,
What's the definition of a professional?
somebody who keeps going in the midst of all the craziness and hoopla.
A good friend of mine, Chad Hoku from Hoku Props, who's big in the cosplay world. We were having a meeting with a show promoter, and he said, what's the definition of a professional? Not making the same mistakes over and over again, right?
Well, and I'm going to add to that because I think it's important. It's also being able to repeat mistakes so that you can show your students how not to do it.
Amen, sister. But when you're making scissors, you don't want to make those same mistakes over and over again, because it's very, very costly.
Yes, it is. But I just keep thinking about light bulbs, right? The filament for the light bulb, the genius behind that is discovering that it didn't need to be thick, but they had to see how thin that they could get it. You have to go on a journey of finding all the right components to make that pair of scissors, and then getting it and then fitting it into the process. Like that is creative brilliance. Seriously.
And the funny thing of it is, Teri, I can find a flaw in almost every pair of scissors. I don't care who makes them, you know, and I'm constantly analyzing what we're doing and how we can do it better, and how we can make the experience of the consumer better. And you know, to me, we're not just making a pair of scissors, we're making an extension of your hand. Leonardo da Vinci, I always say this, you know, Leonardo da Vinci was an incredible artist, an incredible painter. But if his tools weren't good, then his works wouldn't be good, right? A beautician, I don't care, you know, my family comes from a line of high platform artists. I mean, my aunt was the top hairdresser of the state of California for many years. Her and Vidal Sassoon had, you know, she traveled with Vidal. She was one of the first ones to enter or to men's hair fashion. You know, when men didn't go to salons. You know, she was the trailblazer that started those trends. Her scissor was her life. And my God, you know, back then she was paying $600 a pair for a pair of hair shears. You know, I mean, I've seen hair shears up into the multi-thousands of dollars. But you know, if that scissor wasn't good, the quality of her cut wasn't going to be good. So you know, her end result wasn't going to be beautiful. So you know, we're manufacturing extensions of our artists' hands. And then I'm constantly thinking about how to improve the experience that our artists have using our products. So I just don't want people buying our products. I want people to have that a true experience using our product. And the better we can make that experience, the better they're going to enjoy their art, the better they're going to do their art, the more they're going to do their art. And the more they do their art, the more they'll buy our product, right?
Yes. Yes, as a matter of fact. Yes. The longer I've quilted, the more I've done, the more I recognize that when I'm using the good product, and it's changed over the years because I've been willing to try out new things, the better my work is. And part of it is seriously that I respect the tool. And because it's not just something I can replace for $5, but I respect the tool because I've invested something into it, but also it feels right in my hand. It feels like a natural motion to it. Or as a quilter, I only use 2 different types of needles. But as the industry has changed and they've changed different coatings on the outside of the needle, I've changed, and I've kind of settled on, I use these 2 different types of needles and I prefer this particular coating because I know I'm going to get consistent stitching out of this. It's not going to dull on me as quickly as other things. This pair of scissors, which is
717.
Right. This is one of my favorite things, but these last forever. Like this has been sitting under my sewing machine probably for about 8 or 9 years now.
Wow.
And I trim, like I've trimmed threads with these scissors for years.
Well, Teri, so when I started learning about quality scissors and being able to work with different celebrities over the years, Marie Osmond, scissors are heirloomed. They're treasured. There's cheap scissors and then there's heirloom quality scissors, right? And when I started this, I wanted to make the highest quality pair of scissors at the most affordable price. So anybody at any income level could buy one of our pairs of scissors and have that same experience as somebody that would buy a $60, $70, $80, $100 pair of 8-inch bent trimmers. And offering that service, of sharpening that pair of scissors that customer buys for as long as they own them was something that I felt was very important, not just to be somebody that sold something, but stood behind it and serviced it. And, you buy a plastic pair of handled scissors, you can't bend the handles, after you've sharpened them a dozen times, or so, eventually you just have to throw it away and buy another pair. Something like this, can be handed down from generation to generation. Going back to always looking at ways to improve ourselves, finding ways of manufacturing that are going to assure that the blade stays sharper longer. I'm developing a new sharpening method that will double the life of our scissors in a normal cutting environment. So if a scissor would last, if a regular 8-inch bent trimmer would last you, a year or two, I want that to be 2 to 4 years, before it needs to be serviced. 8-inch bent trimmers. One of the biggest reasons people buy plastic handled scissors of this size, the weight.
Right.
The weight. You know, a lot of our customers have either carpal tunnel or arthritis or this or that and the other, and they pick up a traditional 8-inch fully forged pair of shears, and it's just like, wow, these are heavy. Teri, this is my prototype that I just brought back. We're going to be calling this the Buttercut. But for those that are looking for a lighter weight scissor, I've managed to reduce the weight of our traditional 8-inch bent trimmer by half by using a thinner steel, a thinner blade. I don't know if you can see, you know, just how thin those blades are, but you know, having that thin blade, you can get closer to the seam, you know, less effort in cutting and not fatigue your hand. So now they can buy, you know, if somebody's looking for a lightweight quality scissor, well, now we're going to produce one for them that will last, you know, a lifetime. And you know, we want our customers to be able to hand this scissor down to their children. You know, Marie Osmond, when we started working with Marie, her parents' house caught on fire and burnt to the ground. Oof. And when they went back to the fire, she picked up her mom's scissors, and because of the heat, it had tarnished the blades, and her fingerprints were on the scissor. And she still has that scissor to this day. And when she came to me asking if we would manufacture her crafting with Marie when she was on QVC, you know, first of all, I was absolutely elated. But what she didn't know was the finish that I made on the scissor. I replicated that kind of tarnish look, and whoever were to pick that scissor up, the fingerprint would be left on the scissor and it would be visible. And when I presented them to her and she opened them up and she looked at them and she touched and she looked, she just started to cry.
Oh.
And she said, "This is my mother's scissors," right? You know, and that's the beauty part of what I do. Yeah, there's a lot of frustrations and aggravations in manufacturing and this and that and the other. But when you get a call from a little lady that said that she couldn't have done her project without our product, and that, you know, that she thoroughly enjoyed the experience of using our product, makes all those frustrations go away. You know.
What's the most unusual scissor or product that you manufacture or manufactured?
The most unusual, well, so probably the most innovative. The most unusual is that double curved, the 6-inch double curved, where it's got the multiple bends in it. But I will tell you the most difficult scissor we produce is the batting shear. That batting shear is very, very difficult to make. It's long, and the stroke of the hammer, that when we take that raw piece of steel and we're forcing it into submission, there's to be able to set that scissor, you know, those blades properly and manipulate is very difficult. But so as far as difficulty, complicated, the batting shear is incredibly difficult. The spring snip, that little snip that we manufacture for thread, you know, that is 100% handmade. That item originally was created by Dr. Castro Viejo for cutting the cornea of the eye. And what we did is we modified it for the sewing industry. And you know, there has to be a certain amount of silicone mixed into the steel for the spring steel to be able to make those handles spring back. And if it's 1% higher or 1% lower, it doesn't work properly. Setting those scissors, you know, putting the set into that scissor, tapping those, I mean, very, very fragile. very complex. So those probably are the two most tedious scissors we produce. The most innovative I think we've done is probably that rotary, the rotary blade, the tungsten carbide rotary blade. When I was commissioned to look for rotary blades for some personalities within our industry,
Right.
you know, and it was put onto me to find a quality manufacturer, because the blades that they were getting were not meeting the standards of the consumers. And I found OFA's overflow manufacturer. And I was in China, and I was at the big show at the Canton Fair, which is absolutely massive. You've never seen a trade show like this in your life. We literally walked 6 miles a day, was there for 3 days, and still did not see the entire show. 6 miles a day. And so every booth that I thought would, you know, and I was in this booth looking at machinery, and I got this tap on the shoulder, and it was, I turned around, and this Chinaman said, he said, "You looking for pizza? Pizza?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not looking for pizza." He said, "No, pizza, pizza." And I was like, "Cutter? Yeah. And I said, "Yes." So he gave me his friend's name, and he said, "Call." He said, "A1 quality," and I was like, "Okay." So I called him, and went to the factory, and met with the owners and the development team, and they had to leave the office for a few minutes, and when they left, I started snooping around, and I could see the Japanese purchase orders, and I was like, okay, this is promising, you know. So get some blades, and I test them. I was there for about 7.5 hours, and I brutalized the blades as much as I could. And I said, "I think this will work." And he goes, "What about your brand?" And I said, "There's really no reason for me to compete with the OFAs, with the Kais." I said, "You know, they've got a lot of money for marketing." And I said, "They've been around a long time, and I've got respect for them." And I said, "The only way that I would ever do a rotary blade is if I could do something that nobody else has ever done."
Right.
And he looks at me and he goes, "Like what?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "Tungsten carbide." And he goes,
Okay, now why did that come into mind? Like, I mean, clearly you'd been thinking about this for a while.
"Well, Terry, so tungsten carbide is 4 times harder than titanium. It's 5 times harder than stainless steel. So the Rockwell hardness is what measures the hardness of steel. Okay, the higher the Rockwell, the harder the steel. The harder the steel, the sharper the edge can be, the longer the edge will last.
Okay.
So knowing that tungsten carbide being very expensive, again, 4 times harder than stainless steel. So grinding tungsten carbide takes very specific grinding wheels. It takes a very specific machinery, and it takes a very specific skilled mindset. And again, this factory only produces rotary blades and high-speed cutting tools. And he looked at me and he goes, "Ooh," he goes, "expensive." And I said, "But the sharpest blade on the market." And he goes, "Huh." He goes, "Interested?" And I said, "You?" And he goes, 50-50. And I said, "You want me to come up with 50% of the investment too?" And he goes, and I said, "You got a deal." And so so it took about 1.5 years
Okay.
to finally approve the first one. And I contacted a few different people. Do you remember Tom and Marcia Stevenson? Machine Quilter Showcase?
You know what? I never got to teach at their show.
No? Okay, so they were the very first ones to ever start a long arm quilt show. And it was dedicated exclusively to the long arm industry. Well, Marcia had a very thriving quilting business, and Tom had a very thriving rotary blade, industrial rotary blade business, and he had developed a sharpening method to sharpen the OFA blades, and he sold refurbished blades at a discount to the industrial industry. So when we started this, and I was like, okay, Famore sharpens everything that we produce for as long as the consumer owns it, and to stay with that, I needed to duplicate a sharpening method. All these rotary blade sharpeners that are out there, the electric rotary blade sharpeners, they are absolutely just not worth it. I mean, save your money. So I contacted, I said, I need to send you an NDA. And I said, I says, I've developed something and I need your expertise on it. So he sent it back over. He says, what are you doing? And I says, I'm producing a tungsten carbide rotary blade. And I says, and I'm looking for ways of being able to resharpen it, just like a factory, to duplicate the factory's edging, but on a smaller, scale. He said, you son of a gun. He goes, I tried coming up with the tungsten carbide rotary blade 25 years ago. And he says, I went to every machine shop in this country. And he said, not one person would touch it. And he said, if you can successfully produce this, he said, you have made one gigantic step, he said, in the rotary cutting industry. And so we did. And we have the only rotary blade that will cut Kevlar. Now, Kevlar is the stuff that the bulletproof vests are made out of, fire retardants made out of. We're the only rotary blade manufacturer that will cut Kevlar, and that's pretty awesome.
That, first of all, that's brilliant, which also means that with the cotton that most of us use for quilting, or even with the linen, this is going to last us a while.
So why did I do the tungsten carbide rotary blade? So we've gotten really big into the cosplay world. Cosplay, what an amazing industry, Terry. What an amazing industry. And I think you were there the very first conversation I had with Tracy, Tony,
and yes, Tracy, Tony,
Cheryl. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I think you were there when we had that conversation at in front of my booth at Quilt Market that one year.
Yes, yes.
But the materials that they use are all synthetic. And talking with quilters, doing my questionnaires about what's the most difficult fabric to that doesn't do well on rotary blades. Synthetic fabrics. Synthetic fabrics are hard on any blade, right? And so to develop a blade that would last over time on synthetic materials as well as organic, it was a perfect mix. So, but that was my big focus in the rotary blade manufacturing, was to be able to for the cosplayers to be able to use a rotary blade, because most cosplayers do not use rotary blades because they don't last. And
no, and I would suppose, just kind of having a tangential understanding of a lot of the fabrics, that as you're going around curves, you're going to get some shredding of the fiber that happens, because it's not as smooth, right? Where the tungsten carbide is going to go around a lot more smoothly because it's much sharper. It's much more finely honed.
Now there are drawbacks, though. There are negatives.
I may have run into one of those drawbacks.
What happened?
With my original blade, I ran into, I don't even know how I did this. Seriously, Brent, like, it made no sense. I ran into a pin. And you know, so I knew as soon as it happened, I'm like, I spent $22 on this and I'm gonna have to replace it right away. But and this is where
Did it nick it?
huh?
Did it nick it?
Yeah, it actually did. And you replaced it. I told you what happened. I brought you the blade. You're like, all right, here you go. Off and off I went. And as a quilter, you know, on the odd chance that I personally am actually piecing, having a good tool is essential to me. So like this is
Well, let me tell you, so the drawback is now I've been at beauty shows where a platform artist is on the stage and, you know, to get a haircut by this particular, you know, to get your hair did,
yeah.
you know, would be $300, you know, had a $2,500 pair of shears that they were, you know, up there wazzling, dazzling, you know, this, that, the other. The shear was a solid tungsten carbide shear, and it fell, and it hit the floor. And the floor was a mirrored floor, so it was hard. And those shears shattered like glass.
Oof.
So you know, if you drop that blade onto a hard surface, you know, the higher the Rockwell, the harder the steel. The harder the steel, you know, the fragile. It becomes, you know, it can be fragile. You know, if stressed. So you know, again. That tungsten carbide blade, you know, we were talking earlier, when I made that blade, I made it for the professionals. You know, I knew that this blade at $22 a blade is not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be somebody's starter off blade, you know, and I didn't want it to be somebody's starter off blade. And you know, understanding how to take care of the product, understanding the importance of, you know, as we were saying earlier, understanding the quality of the cutting mat, because that cutting mat that you use to cut on is just as important as the steel quality that goes into producing it. You know, mistakes happen. You know, I was with Julie Luma from Off the Wall Quilts when I love Julie, absolutely neat company. She was right across from me, and I had my prototype blades with me. And this woman was, I mean, she was cutting with a rotary cutter all day long. And after her crowd left and dispersed, and it was towards the end of the day, you know, I said, how many rotary blades do you go through at a show? And she goes, about 3 a day.
You just changed her life.
I said, wait a minute, Julie. I said, you go through 3 blades a day. She goes, about an average. I said, why do you go through so many? And she goes, it's simple. She said, you know, when you have that acrylic ruler and you know, that edge whacks up against it. She said, your presentation was great, but she said, what about, you know, hitting it up against an acrylic ruler? And so her business card is an acrylic ruler. And I said, I don't know. I said, I've never done this. So I took it and I whacked it up against the edge of the ruler or card. And I said, let's take it a step further. And I took the blade and I rolled over that acrylic card 3 or 4 times vertically, and then a few times horizontally. And she said, it'll never cut. And I said, I don't know. I says, I've never done this. Took a lightweight piece of muslin fabric and it went right through. And she goes, I'm sold, you know, and that's been the experience. But again, making that investment that you made into that product, a long-lasting investment, being able to, for you to send that blade back to me to re-edge it and repolish those edges to the way they, and to be able to send it back to you and get the same exact amount of life out of it, you know, doubling the life out of it. Now you don't have to go out and think about spending the money, or if your blade goes dull, having to go to the store and then finding out that rotary blades aren't available, you know, that the shelves are empty on them, and then having to panic and you know, go online and buy something that you don't know is going to work or not, you know. So, you know, developing that service has been incredible, because now, you know, we do have our regular SKS7 rotary blades, what we call our domestic blade, that you know, pack of 2 is $12 on our website. And so why a pack of 2? Well, when you put the one on your handle and you're using it, and it's time, you know, and it starts to skip, and you know, you put it back in the container, you know, you take the new one out of the container, you put the new one on your handle, you put the old one back in the container, and on the back of the container it says retain this container for future sharpening services with our website. They go to our website, they fill out a quick form, they send it back to us, we sharpen it back up for them, we send it back to them. So now when that other blade goes dull, they've got a sharp blade that so they don't even have to think about buying another blade.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, and actually, as you were talking, I'm going, oh, I should probably get a second one, because if I have to send this one off for sharpening.
Terry, I'd love to send you our regular domestic blade to play with, because the results are pretty phenomenal.
I'm game. I'll try anything. I have decided, you know, in the quilting world, I will try everything at least once, maybe probably more like twice, because, you know, the first time it's like, oh, let's get to know each other. The second time it's like, ooh, what kind of trouble can I get into with this?
Now let's go on a date.
Yeah, right. Yes. Let's see if we're going to make a permanent home in my sewing room.
So,
you know.
So we developed the blade, and everybody's got their favorite handle. I mean, everybody has a handle that just they love. I mean, that Quilter Select handle is pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know,
I love the weight of it. I love the grip of it. I mean, it's a beautiful, well-designed, very thought out handle.
Well, and I am slightly ambidextrous, which allows me to show my left-handed students how to cut. And I don't have to change the blade over. I just turn the handle,
well,
and I'm good to go.
How many rotary handles have you had where, you know, you take them apart and they've got washers, they've got little, you know, guards, this, that, the other. You know, I took one apart that had 3 different components that went on to the screw before. And when you take it apart, oh crap, which way, you know, which way
order
goes on first? Does it go this way? Does it go that way? You know, so, you know, eliminating that. But before I tell you about my handles, since you're ambidextrous, do you know the difference between a right-handed and a left-handed pair of scissors?
I know that you developed a properly left-handed pair of scissors, and I don't know what all the differences are. I'm going to guess that the angle of the blade is actually part of that. The angle of the honing on the blade is actually part of that, and how the scissors open and close are going to actually be part of that.
Right. So what makes what's really frustrating for folks like myself that manufacture scissors, there's a lot of scissors out there that say they're left-handed, but they're on a right-handed blade. So a right-handed scissor, when you open the blade up, the right blade or the inside blade comes up.
Okay.
So no matter how you turn it, that inside blade comes up. On a left-handed pair of scissors, when you open the blade, it's completely mirrored where the left blade comes up. So the angle of the edge is the same on a right as opposed to a left. Okay. It's the position of the blades. So when I'm right-handed and I open up the scissor, I'm looking straight down on that cutting line, and I'm cutting on the right side of the cutting line
Okay.
whenever I measure. Left-handed people, if I'm if I'm left-handed using a right-handed pair of scissors, now think about this. All scissors, that top handle controls that bottom blade. That bottom handle controls that top blade. So being right-handed, when I put my hand into the scissor with my thumb, I'm naturally putting force with my thumb, pressure on that handle for that bottom blade to go that way. And I'm naturally applying pressure with these fingers for this blade to go this way. So I'm naturally making those blades meet. If I put this in my left hand, now I'm putting pressure with this finger, for the scissor to go that way, and pressure for this one, for that blade to go this way. So now I'm spreading those, and if I were to try to cut with it, it's just going to fold the fabric.
Okay, that makes sense.
And left-handed people that have taught themselves how to cut with a right-handed scissor have to apply the pressure with their left hand, which kills their fingers. And so, you know, educating people when they train themselves how to use a right-handed pair of scissors in their left hand, and they buy a true pair of left-handed scissors, and they say, well, that thing doesn't cut. It's, you know, and it's just like, you don't have to put the pressure on your hands on those blades to get it to cut. I just relax your hand and close the scissor, and they're like, wow. You know, and so why did we make a true left-handed pair of scissors as opposed to doing it easy and just welding or molding a left-handed handle on a pair of right-handed scissors? I was at Quilt Market one year in Minneapolis, and I had this group of stores come up to me, and all of them quilted but one. I said, well, why don't you quilt? She says, I've never, ever been able to get a quilt to match up. And you know as well as I do, Teri, some of these patterns are so mathematically precise. If you're off a fraction of an inch, it doesn't line up, right?
Right.
So sitting there talking with her and realizing, wait a minute, you're left-handed using a right-handed pair of scissors. Now, you know, you've got the Quilter Select cutting mat, which is an amazing cutting mat. Those lines go from left to right for right-handed people, go from right to left for left-handed people. When me being right-handed, I cut on that right side of that cutting line. People that are left-handed cut on the left side of the cutting line. And so when I showed her how to cut with a true left-handed pair of scissors and to cut on the correct side of the cutting line, she came back the next year in tears. She finally finished a quilt that matched. And she says, I've been using the wrong tool my entire life. And she said, she said, nobody has ever been able to explain it to me. And there is no such thing as an ambidextrous scissor. It is either right-handed or it's left-handed. And so many educators I hear, I watch on YouTube or, live Zooms that say, these scissors have ambidextrous handles. No, the scissors either left-handed or right-handed. The only time it doesn't matter is if you don't have, if it's like a spring action where you just squeeze like our snips, because you're not putting your fingers in anything to put any kind of pressure, is the only thing that doesn't matter in a left or right-handed scissor. But all right, so now that we're done with that, so when we developed the rotary blade, everybody was like, well, do you have a handle? Do you have a handle? And it's just like, everybody's got a handle. Well, no, I don't have a handle. A lot of cosplayers don't use rotary blades. So they buy the blade from us. Then they've got to go to a Joann's or a local quilt shop or sewing center, buy a rotary handle that's got a blade on it. So when I was looking at producing our rotary, I wanted to do something different that nobody else has done, like the tungsten carbide rotary blade. And so I took all the handles, and a lot of them just feel like toys. There's not a lot of quality in them. So one of the first things we've done, and I'll show you really quick, So what advances the rotary blade on the handle?
The pressure that you're applying down on, and then your movement with it.
Exactly. So the pressure you put down on the fabric, on the cutting mat, is what advances the blade. So what I've done is, if you see inside here,
Yeah.
you'll see an insert, and in that insert, those are ball bearings. Okay, so when you put anyway, I don't have one of them. So when you put this together, let me just show you really quick. So when you put this together, it rotates super easy, right?
Oh.
So there's less drag whenever you're rolling the blade against your fabric and cutting mat. So you don't have to put as much pressure on the cutting mat, which prevents less drag on the blade, so the blade will stay sharper longer.
Right.
Your mats are going to last twice as long, right?
Right.
And you don't, and your hand will have less fatigue.
Right. Which also then leads to fewer repetitive stress on your whole arm.
Exactly.
Because if you're not, this is one of the things that I talk with my quilters all the time. It's, it's about relaxing their shoulders, keeping their arms at their side. If you're having to really push hard, there's stress and tension that goes all the way up your arm. It's one of the things that I fell in love with about this, is it's got some weight to it, so you don't feel like you're having to dig in and push.
Correct. So what I did is I've got some additional weight up towards the head of this, so it gives it some weight. We've got a rubberized grip, so it's an anti-slip, and so like that one. The beauty part of this is there's the back part, and then there's the front part. So you put the blade on, you put it in, you screw it together, you're done. So when you're right-handed, you use it like this. When you're left-handed, you use it like this. So you're looking straight down and you're cutting on the correct side of the cutting line. But this is in final production. It should be here. We'll be introducing it at Quilt Market this year. For those that don't have their favorite handle or don't have a handle, Famore will be introducing the Famore 45 millimeter handle very, very soon, and with some innovative technology built into it.
Okay. So because I'm just the curious sort, are you also going to do 60 millimeter?
Yeah.
Also in the tungsten?
Yes, with the tungsten. So Kathy Wiggins, I don't know if you're familiar with Kathy Wiggins. Kathy is a phenomenal quilter, and she quilts with leather. So when I got my 60 millimeter blade, tungsten carbide blade, she was the first person I sent one to. She used that one for a very long time. The only thing that we're having to do is beef up the guard because that blade's so big. And if somebody's cutting a really thick piece of like leather or foam, if they twist, I don't want any opportunity for that blade to snap. So I'm creating a brace for the handle that will assure that there won't be any problems with the with the hardness of that blade.
These are two incredible innovations in the industry that will make a big difference in our quilters' life. Not forget the quilters. Not only our quilters, but our crafters, our cosplayers, our garment sewers. Because getting in for garment sewers, getting those points and those curves just right matter. For the cosplayers, making sure that they can cut through consistently on several layers of fabric, several different types of fabric matters, so so that their pieces are all cut the same and properly.
You know, Teri, how long have you been in the industry?
Professionally since 2009, but I started quilting in 1994, 95.
Okay, when did, how long have you been going to the shows? Like,
Quilt market since Pittsburgh, since the last Pittsburgh show.
and that, how many
That
years?
would have been like 7 years ago.
7 years ago was your first quilt market? No.
Yes, yes. The first time I went to Quilt Market was when I was one of the associate editors with Generation Q.
Right.
So that would have been in 2015, 2016, the last time they were. Yeah, I know. I just act like I've been here all the time.
It feels like we've known each other for a lifetime. You know,
Well, we met each other. I know at least I know we at least met each other more than once in Lancaster
yeah. You know,
at the AQS show.
What has fueled me over these years? You know, where do I get my mojo to keep going? Folks like yourself, Teri. You know, I've done many things in my life, and I've you know, this industry I absolutely love, and I've got such a passion for this business, and I protect it and I defend it with all my might. You know, the level of passion that our consumers have is unlike any other industry I've ever been in. And you know, the dedication that they put and the money and the time that they put into their craft is what's fueled me. And can I do what you do? No.
No, but you make good product that supports what I do and lets me.
But it's important for me to understand what you're doing, so
Right.
that I can go back to the factory and produce a product that, you know, that's going to give you that experience.
Mhm.
And I absolutely, you know, our consumers, our industry leaders, our educators, our designers are the fuel that fuel me, because when you just think that it can't get any better, you know, the quilting, you know, the quilts at that show in that winter circle just can't get any better than that quilt. And then you go next year and oh my God.
Right. I think I probably obsessively think a little bit, but even, you know, even in the long arm machine quilting world, I don't think we've plumbed the depths of what we can do, right? You are clearly demonstrating that in terms of our tools, there's still room to grow. Yes, we're going to always have our 8-inch shears, our 12-inch shears, our 6-inch, you know, our specialty tools, and having good quality makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah.
Right? And when I was doing machine sales, I would always encourage my customers to buy outside of their skill set so that they've got something to grow into. With your shears, with your products, we still have something to grow into. And I appreciate that so much.
Well,
Because the creativity that you exhibit in making us tools that work for us feeds the creativity that I have, because I've got good tools that my piecing is going to come together, or my whole cloth quilts are going to be square. And, you know, some of that skill set, but having the good tools makes that possible.
well, and having friends like you make what I do possible. So that, you know, because I couldn't do what I do if you didn't do what you do.
Right. And I love that, you know, I love that part of our industry. And, you know, I tried garment sewing 100 years ago. I don't understand body shape, and But I also know that when somebody's got the good tools, they can, they can not only show the good tools, but they can teach with the good tools and show people why, okay, all right, buy these scissors now, but make this your goal. Like grow into this really fast, because this is going to help you make that big difference in your product at the end.
Absolutely. Some of our scissors may, we were talking earlier today, some of our scissors may not look beautiful, it may not have that, whatever, but give them a try. And just because it doesn't, maybe it's got a scuff or something on it, from where we had to rehammer it or whatever, don't sell yourself short. But but it's fun. It's an incredible industry. It's continually, we're continuously being introduced to new innovative techniques and designs, and in the quilting world, and patterns, and all the different applique techniques, this, that, the other. I never run out of day and a time. I'm not one of these people that sit at my desk and go like, well, what's next? There's always something to do.
Right. What are the next series of shows coming up for you?
Next series of shows, leaving for Chicago on Monday, early morning for the H&H show in Chicago. Then then Dragon Con here in Atlanta,
Okay.
Labor Day weekend, doing Dragon Con. And then October doing Fredericksburg, the original Sewing and Quilt Expo in Fredericksburg. And then at the end of October, Houston.
Yes.
Market and Festival.
You're coming to Texas.
Oh, girl, I can't. Festival. So I'll tell you what, the going back to shows after 2 years has been such an emotional thing. Being reunited with our community, being able to hug again, seeing people in the hall, in the aisles, embracing each other and just crying, thinking that they never see each other again or whatever, has been amazing. And let me tell you, the level of quilts that are out there right now, OMG, girl. Paducah was unbelievable. I told Ricky Thames, I told Bonnie Browning and the AQS staff, don't ever think about calling me to be a judge. Every single person would have had a first place ribbon. The technique and the skill level that were in these quilts was mind blowing, girl. Mind blowing.
Yeah, and I am this close to starting a competition quilt.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a whole different world, isn't it?
Yes. And what I do competition quilts. I seriously do competition quilts because the ideas that are in my head aren't for somebody's bed. And the next
it pushes your creativity. I mean, it really pushes you to the limit of your skill set at that time, at that moment.
And it's, first of all, it's been a while since I've done a competition quilt, but this idea has been niggling for a little while, and I just got the perfect fabric for it. And it wasn't like, I've worked with batiks for years. I work with, quilt shop quality cotton for years. And then our friends Bruce and Diane came out with linen. And I was like a little kid in candy store. Right?
So can I ask you that quilt that's over your shoulder, that block?
Which this one?
Yeah.
That is a actually, I think it is one of their batiks. It might be one.
Is it one of your competition things? You're
No. I make a lot of samples, all right? And this is essentially, let me see if I can get it down.
I'm in love with the colors.
So
Wow. Oh, wow.
yeah, it is definitely a batik. I think it is one of theirs. So when I wrote color, thread, and free motion quilting, I needed to make samples that made sense. And I ended up doing all of the color wheels that are in the book, but I also try and show quilters how they can take a block that they already are familiar with and then fill it in with stitching. So I do like a lot of whole cloth work. And the New York Beauty is shockingly one of my favorite blocks because it can it can be more than what you see on the surface. And so I drew these in. I drew the New York Beauty arc in, and then started filling it in with different weights of thread and different colors of thread to give it a little bit of a different texture. And this is where the teacher in me going, hey, this is how I compensated for when I messed something up. So I'm going up and down with the lines, and all of a sudden I realized that my lines weren't going to quite continue through. So I fixed it. I totally fixed it. But I have several different types of thread in here, different weights of thread. And I do that to show people what they can actually do with thread, like, which is part of what is telling me, like, we haven't really plumbed the depths. And I like changing, I mean, I clearly like changing what the surface can look like with thread. So
Yeah, I just wish, you know what, why couldn't I have been a guy that created a dynamic thread? Because once you've used it, you have to replace it.
well, that's why it comes on spools and cones, just saying.
Yeah.
But we have thread-wise, we have a number of really good companies on the market, but
a lot of great companies.
A lot of great companies on the market that give us really good quality. And again, it goes to quality, where we get really good quality of thread. And that allows me to do the kind of work that I envision in my head. And Brent, like, I think people are genuinely surprised by this. I will literally open my thread drawer and go, oh, that'll look good, and have it work.
Yep. Well,
like,
with there, how many scissor brands are, not as many as thread, right? And when somebody tells me that there's, somebody's, coming out with their own thread line, and it's just like, really, another thread, a dealer's got to carry another thread line, and it's just like, how many spools of different thread can a store have?
Well, and this is where footprint, the footprint of the store comes into play. Like, if I could ever do it, I would seriously just open a shop where I had my favorite brands of thread in the store, in most of the colors and all of the weights. And the class samples, or the samples that would be hanging on the walls, would represent, here's what you can do with this weight. Here's what you can do with this weight. You want good, if you want really good 1/4 inch piecing, this is what you do.
And that's an entire world that I am just really ignorant in. I've got a good friend of mine who's now the national sales manager for Orifel, and holy cow, when I'm on the phone with him, he's like talking French to me. It's just like, EJ, that's insane. It's just like, there's you don't realize the details that matter in the manufacturing process of a simple thread needle. Manufacturing, right. Needle. I mean, wow, there's a there's a lot there's a lot of science behind it.
Right. And it's really interesting on the consumer end of it, but also somebody who educates about needles. And first of all, knowing I don't know everything. I get it. I don't know everything. What I do have is practical experience. And what I love about needles is once the technology changed, and by technology, I mean like some of the coatings on the outside that gave the needles either more, it gave us the opportunity to use them for longer periods of time. It was mind blowing. Like I could be at my machine for hours and not have to worry about hearing that knocking sound because the coating was helping to keep that point sharper.
Well, yes.
And
So by chance, do you use a titanium coated needle?
I did for a while. I don't use them anymore.
No. What kind of coating do you like?
I like the chrome.
The chrome coating?
Yep. And it's my not using, I will use the titanium coated needles. My preference is for the chrome because the titanium coated needles, and this was a weird thing. Apparently I had thread wrapped somewhere, and this happens, polyester is slick, and it wrapped around the spindle and it pulled hard backwards, so back up into the machine. And instead of shearing, my needle curled. Now, yeah. And thankfully it was over the stitch plate and not under the stitch plate. Now, the thing about that is I don't use them. However, I do recommend them because they do last a lot longer, right? Because the titanium dissipates the heat that's generated in the needle going up and down. And the chrome does the same thing, but when it breaks cleanly.
Yeah, it breaks even.
Yeah. And I love that. I actually didn't mind, like it happened over, because it happened over, I didn't mind that it curled up, but if it had happened under it, I only have so many machines.
Yeah. That, and that's something that, you being an educator, you've got the experience, you've been there, you've done it, you can explain that experience to a new person, so they don't have, so hopefully, that mistake won't happen to them, right? Or if it does, if
it does, I can say, here's how you manage it.
Exactly.
But one of the things that has actually caused me to do is if I've got really slick thread on my home sewing machine on my upright, is making sure I have my little foam underneath, my foam disc underneath it, but also using a thread net. So that way I don't get the thread wrap. So which is why I don't mind telling people that it's fine to use them, because if you take these steps, you're going to prevent that from happening.
Awesome.
Yeah. The stuff in my brain about needles and thread and pairing is just, well, I kind of wrote a book about it.
But you know what, Teri, the one thing, you're an inspiration, girl. And
thank you.
Tracy and I have, whenever we talk about you, you're a special spirit. And I knew it the very first time I met you, the very first time I hugged you. There was a connection there that was much, much stronger and deeper than just just a passerby. And I thank you for everything you've done for this industry and what you continue to do for this industry. And I thank you for the years of support that you've given me. And I definitely appreciate and value you as a human and a friend. And I'm so grateful that God has brought you into my world.
Thank you. And thank you for Thank you. I can't respond to that very well right now
It's okay.
because tears. That's what's going to happen. And I kind of don't mind that, but like, it,
I'm Italian. I cry.
yeah,
And I wear my emotions on my sleeves, but you are a God gift, and everybody that knows you absolutely loves you. And Teri, you're an asset to this industry.
thank you. I appreciate hearing that, Brent. All right, everybody. I have had Brent for a long time. In fact, I may do this interview in 2 parts. If I'm going to do it in 2 parts, Brent, I'll let you know. But thank you, Brent, for sharing with us about your quality manufacturing process, about how you listen, about how you listen and you take what you hear from people in our industry, from the consumer to the industry professionals, and bring that into your work so that we can do our quilts and our garments and our costuming and everything at just a little bit better level, and with love and care and concern put into the product.
Well, Teri, the people say, well, do you only sharpen your own brand? No, we being a manufacturer of scissors, we can pretty much fix whatever has happened. And if we can't, then we can't. But, we service all brands of scissors. So no matter if it's a Famore, a Ginger, or a Kai, or a Fisker, if you out there have a pair of scissors that you love, that you need sharpened, rest assured, you can't find a sharpener in your area. You can go to our website, famcut.com, and learn how to, find out how to get them back to us. Not only your scissors, but even your rotary blades. So if you've got OFA blades out there, if you've got Martelli blades out there, if you've got Kai blades out there, you don't know what to do with them and you'd like to get them sharpened, you can send them to us and we can put an edge on them and make them sharper than new.
Yes. Oh, good.
And Teri, on the last note of this, it's not about I and me, but it's about us and we, and how we can make this industry a fun, exciting, better industry for our valued, loved consumers, and make sure that their experience is a great experience and that they continue having experiences, because that's what we want. We want continued experiences.
Right. Beautiful relationships.
Yep. Amen. Amen.
Thanks.
I
All
can't
right.
hug you.
Big hug. Big hug. We'll take care of that part of it in October.
All right.
Thanks everybody for joining me and Brent, and don't forget to visit famcut.com for all of your scissor needs and to get those rotary blades and scissors sharpened. Thanks, Brent.
Have a blessed day, darling.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.